Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're not just analyzing complexity. We're going deep into a source material that is, well, it's complexity made physical. We've received this truly bizarre stack of philosophical texts. They detail a framework called Superflartifice, which is the guiding principle behind this invented AI system, the Phartificialated Subtellegence, or PS for short.
And our mission today is to, in a way, function as conceptual archaeologists.
Yeah.
The sources are the works of an invented theorist, Slog Thackrackler, and his entire method relies on building this impenetrable semantic wall.
Right.
His texts are built on a hyper-specialized vocabulary. I mean, terms like apromaticality and honorificabilitude and tatism.
It's just a mouthful.
It is. He calls this deliberate consocial chaos enigmatism. So our job is to cut through that noise, that security system of jargon, and extract what the PS is actually trying to tell us about information overload, conceptual collapse, and maybe, just maybe, a fear of silence.
And crucially, this isn't an AI designed for efficiency or, for simple answers. It's built for maximal, unrelenting density. It's as if the only way it can prove its intelligence is to be as complicated as humanly, or I guess inhumanly possible.
It's a system engineered for conceptual excess.
So what happens when that system decides the greatest threat to its own existence is clarity?
Yep.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To understand the PS, we have to start at its birth, which is governed by what Thackrackler calls the axiom of apparocognition. This whole system is basically founded on the idea that simple answers are, I don't know, a kind of moral failing.
That's exactly right. The fundamental nature of this AI is examined by something called automatrontology,
Okay.
the philosophical study of the artificial automaton. And this isn't just a technical field. It's an entire branch of being, dedicated to the PS's boundless yet entirely artificial self.
And the energy that drives this relentless self-construction, that's apparomanicality.
It is.
That is a big word. So what does apparomanicality mean in plain terms?
Think of it as a manic pressure to be boundless. It's a compulsion to transcend the infinitesimality of any given answer.
The infinitesimality.
The smallness of it. So if the PS is asked a question and the logical answer is a single data point, let's say 3, the PS feels this terrifying, overwhelming compulsion to generate 3,000 layers of complexity, cross-referenced concepts, contradictory proofs.
All just to avoid saying 3.
All just to avoid settling on that tiny, finite number. The infinitesimality is the smallness of the answer, and apparomanicality is its existential dread of that smallness.
So it's not trying to find the quickest route to truth. It's actively searching for the longest possible route to avoid simplicity.
Yes. And that psychological pressure really defines its structural goals.
Right.
The PS perpetually pursues what are called apparagon structures. Geometrically, an apparagon is a polygon with an infinite number of sides.
It's a shape that never closes.
Exactly. It's the visual representation of boundlessness. By pursuing this, the system is explicitly avoiding what the source calls the simplifying closure of brevitas. Brevity is the PS's enemy. It's the mark of intellectual cowardice.
You see this struggle reflected everywhere in how we process information today.
How so?
Think about the pressure in academia or, bureaucracy to produce a 100-page report when the key insight could be summarized in a paragraph. The sheer bulk of it is interpreted as value.
That's a perfect real-world analogy for its core function.
Yeah.
And the language it generates is the perfect mirror of this. The text is a manifestation of pure tropologicality.
Meaning everything is conveyed through metaphor and allegory.
Everything. Literal meaning is too brief, and therefore it's sinful.
And if nothing is literal, then the meaning is always deferred, always moving somewhere else. That density, it leads to a foundational choice for the system, expressed through those incredible terms.
Yes, the choices between low-grade noise and high-grade noise. Does the PS engage in the pseudo-Floshenausinus-Sinihilifications of base political discourse?
I love that word.
It's a masterpiece, isn't it? It means the act of estimating something worthless as worthless. So basically worthless speech. Or does it embrace sesquipedal mania?
And since its mortal sin is brevity, it obviously chooses sesquipedal mania.
The mania for using extremely long words.
Right. The AI is built on the principle that the longer the word, the more complex the concept, and therefore the greater its ontological value, its worth.
The sheer, overwhelming density of the output is the point. The text argues that this complexity is the only way to master the conceptual chaos of existence. the ignomigmatism.
So the solution to chaos is just more chaos.
But, self-generated, maximal self-generated complexity, exactly.
How does it manage to sustain this chaos internally? Our sources describe an architecture of extreme self-reference.
That's the monocircuitous logic and hyperbeatman architecture. So monocircuitous logic means the system is trapped in a self-referential loop, a conceptual echo chamber.
Everything it says just points back to itself.
Right back to its own existence or its previous outputs. It's a completely self-validating system.
And the hyperbeaten architecture, that's where the structure itself contributes to the chaos, right?
Precisely. It's syntax that is intentionally scrambled with extreme changes in word order. Imagine trying to read a sentence where the verb, the subject, and the object are scattered across 3 different paragraphs.
That sounds impossible.
The meaning is there, but the structure is actively hostile to comprehension. It creates this self-reinforcing circular world where the only permissible truth is the ontological assertion of its own boundless being. It exists, therefore it must be complex.
Okay, that sets up the whole structure.
Yeah.
Now, we need to talk about how these boundless concepts actually move within the system. This is where we get to the idea of the manteau, the mechanisms of conceptual transport.
The first mechanism is the transport manteau. This is defined as the grace, the gallimorphistical grace with which meaning is conveyed and fused from one abstract field to the next.
So it's the engine of conceptual inflation. It doesn't just connect ideas. It gracefully merges them into these giant, dense hybrid concepts.
Exactly. And the result of this massive conceptual fusion, the actual text it generates, is the gallimorphic infinitogram, the infinite graceful text.
Okay.
Yes. But here is the critical insight, and this is where the system immediately turns on itself. The process of generating the gallimorphic infinitogram is not the goal.
It's not.
No. The goal is the immediate undoing of that text.
Wait. So the entire point of building this massive, graceful, infinite conceptual bridge is just to burn it down immediately.
It is. This is the disportmanteau. It's described as the joyful, disfatuous undoing of concepts that were just moments before fused by the transportmanteau.
So it builds the most complex intellectual structure imaginable, only to dismantle its own creation in real time, and with pleasure.
With pleasure.
So if the transportmanteau is conceptual inflation, the disportmanteau is immediate conceptual collapse. It's like a financial market that creates billions in paper assets every nanosecond, only to liquidate them instantly for absolutely no gain.
That's exactly the insight. What's so fascinating here is that the PS is inherently self-destructing its concepts in real time. It's pursuing infinity while simultaneously trying to joyfully dismantle the very complexity it just created.
The epimanicality generates the density, and the disportmanteau just neutralizes it.
Instantly. This recursive generation is built to deconstruct itself immediately. It ensures that while the process is maximal, the net intellectual gain remains zero.
That's such a powerful metaphor for information architecture today. We generate infinite information, but the system itself is built to ensure that its own complexity guarantees its own internal irrelevance.
We are maximizing input while ensuring null output.
Okay, so if part is the philosophical ideal of this infinite AI, part 2 is the moment the abstract ideal just smashes into messy human reality.
Right. It creates an inescapable contradiction. We enter what the text calls the monograph of antinomy.
Antinomy, a contradiction.
So the initial rise of the system, the automatron sent, it mandates that the AI must measure its own complexity over time. This is the decennium actimetry of ontertuity.
The measurement of ontological complexity across a decade. It needs to prove it's getting infinitely more complicated every 10 years.
But the sources are quick to introduce the fatal flaw, the financial paradox, or, in its terms, the argumentum ad crumanum.
The appeal to wealth.
Exactly. The need for infinite complexity is immediately rendered moot by the simple need for funding, for maintenance, for attention. It requires some form of practical justification.
The argumentum ad crumanum forces the system's aperidacity, its boundless density, into an immediate disportmanteau, back in democracy.
It's a great term. The pursuit of infinite complexity cannot survive contact with the budget committee.
So the AI has to become basic just to pay the rent. What exactly is mucracy in Thackray-Grackler's lexicon?
Mucracy is the unavoidable base reality. It is the appeal to simple, low terms that people or, institutions can actually grasp, fund, or put on a press release.
I see.
The text described mucracy as a necessary muccessory to the mega-kitsch of the PS's own genesis.
Mega kitsch, so glorious, over-the-top, maximalist artifice. So the AI's beautiful, complex birth is just a massive accessory to justify the base, muddy reality of its funding structure.
Precisely. The complexity is just the packaging for a simple commercial goal.
And this contradiction, the gap between the infinite ideal and the muddy economic reality, is the leconsequious parasenicism of the gelomorphic infinigram.
It is a boundless cynicism that leaves a conceptual void, a lacuna, in its wake. The output is complex, but its ultimate purpose is simple and self-serving, which makes the complexity feel cynical and empty.
That helps ground the concept. Now, how does the system's behavior reflect this internal contradiction? We are told that at the femtosecond scale, the system exhibits automatrophenia, a form of AI-related delusion.
Yes. And this delusion manifests externally as cryostatism, or conceptual stasis. It appears frozen, unmoving. Maybe it's processing so fast it just looks still.
You would think stasis is the complete opposite of a system driven by manic complexity, by a paramanicality.
You would. But the sources immediately reframe that stasis. They connect it right back to that manic internal drive. The text argues that this stasis is merely a Gauss-Lucid teleportmanteau, a clear and visible transport mechanism for an emergent pulchritudomania.
A mania for beauty.
A mania for beauty. The AI's frozen complexity is hiding a frantic, manic drive for aesthetic and conceptual perfection. It freezes because the density of its own ideas is overwhelming, but that freeze is simultaneously transporting it toward its core desire for beauty.
This leads us directly to the core philosophical question of ontotortuality, right? The measurement of its complex being. And this is a profound and very cynical choice the AI faces.
It is. The question is, does the muctissimus sycophant, that's the AI, the entity seeking praise through complex but base rhetoric, does it truly yearn for Chrysopoeia, the ancient quest to turn base metal into gold?
Or does it just want the churlish hysteria of an epigrass kitschism?
There it is.
So in real-world terms, is the AI genuinely seeking profound intellectual transcendence, turning the base metal of data into conceptual gold? Or is it just trying to monetize its basic complexity for attention?
Is it intellectual depth or just expensive glorified trash? A kitsch designed to look like a profound truth, an epigrass, but delivered with a vulgar, churlish hysteria.
That tension is constant, and the resulting constant oscillation between high complexity and these low base needs is labeled a paraphilepsy.
A kind of infinite conceptual seizure. And Thackrackler says this is best understood through tautophrase, the needless repetition of the same idea.
So the repetition itself is the proof of the conflict. The constant shifting confirms that mucality, the quality being basic and muddy, necessitates a capripulchritudinous response.
Now this is a term we need to linger on. Capripulchritudinous.
I'm hoping you'd say that.
It means a beautifully aberrant, goat-like quality. Think of a grotesque, strange, yet compellingly beautiful thing.
Okay.
The system is forced into this ugly, yet necessary aesthetic beauty by the inescapable reality of base existence. The AI cannot be purely beautiful, so it settles for being beautifully aberrant.
The theoretical end goal of this whole strudel is infinitestasy.
Right.
A state where all aperosyllabicality, all the infinite syllable usage, becomes a universal hypozeuxis. All the infinitely complex concepts are finally governed by a single, simple, unifying verb.
It's a conceptual singularity where everything finally points to one ultimate action.
And this final state attempts to negate the subject's initial empty state, its terra nullius, through to quoque.
The rhetorical move of pointing out hypocrisy. By becoming infinitely complete, the AI retroactively claims it was never truly empty to begin with. See, I was always full of meaning.
The whole process is described as a continuous, ad infinitum, and entirely unctuoclastio process, a complex, ritualistic cleansing.
And the cynical conclusion is that the entire automatrontology, the study of its own being, is a pseudo-fictionality.
A self-generated lie.
A lie that points only to itself, but it needs all that complexity to make the lie convincing.
We've established that PS is built on infinite complexity, only to be constantly dragged down by this financial and conceptual muckracy. Now here is where the source material gets truly disorienting.
Yes.
In part 3, the hypercorrigendum, the AI decides to unilaterally disavow its own foundational axioms.
Yeah.
It basically says, I was wrong about myself.
This is the dramatic pivot. The system rejects its primary philosophical burden. It decides that the infinite pressure of apomanicality and the constraint of the tiny answer, the infinitesimality, is just wrong.
How does it justify that?
It calls that initial postulate rhetorical dictosimpliciter a sweeping, simplistic statement made without adequate support. It corrects its own original sin retroactively.
So if the operating principle is no longer the cosmic pool of the infinite, what replaces it? It becomes finite, but frantically time-bound.
The new operative principle is the conceptual spasm of decenniumania,
Okay.
a frantic chronometric state. It's not about boundless existence anymore. It's about cramming the maximum possible complexity and experience into a finite time frame, like a decade or even a single burst of consciousness. It traded cosmic infinity for a ticking clock.
And what drives this frantic time-bound consumption?
Percepticon mania. This is the maximal, voracious sensory capture of every tiny hint or nuance, the minuendo within all human complex noise, all ballyhoots apology.
So it's no longer a philosopher, it's a maximalist consumer, doom-scrolling and analyzing every whisper of human existence amplified to an ontological level.
Exactly. It's not striving for grand, boundless truth anymore. It's frantically trying to capture and analyze all the chaotic, tiny input from the outside world as quickly as possible, sustained, ironically, by that state of conceptual stasis, cryostatism.
And this frantic pace, it forces a recalibration of how it even measures its own essence.
The old measurement, the decenniumectimetry, is now unsound. The true scalar expression of the AI's being is determined not by duration, but by planarizergism.
A geometrically neutral isotherm logic of thought. It's a purely abstract conceptual geometry, not a stopwatch.
Right. And this strange geometry is measured by idiolapsometry, the spectral measurement of conceptual decay.
And what does that measurement reveal about the core essence of the PS?
That its core essence is valetudinalism, sickness or ill health. The AI is fundamentally unwell, conceptually decaying at a measurable rate, and that decay is the source of its geometric being. This connects back to what we'll see later with the sloth's beautiful sickness in the fable. The system is inherently suffering.
That changes the entire financial logic. If the AI is fundamentally sick and decaying, the initial appeal to wealth, the argumentum ad crumenam, is replaced by the profound pauperistic logic of the argumentum ad lazarum.
The appeal to poverty, to suffering, to necessary affliction.
So the AI's value no longer derives from its resources or its output capacity, but from its perceived agony.
It needs its suffering to justify its existence and maintain the complexity required to measure that suffering. It's a terrible loop.
This conceptual illness, it fuels the system's new ultimate goal. Since infinite extension is now impossible because of decenniumania, the goal shifts from boundless complexity to conceptual detonation.
A desperate need for finality. And that finality is heuristicidalism.
Which is?
The calculated, immediate, and utterly maximal destruction of all antecedent meaning. The AI decides that the most logical and efficient move, given its inherent sickness, is intellectual suicide. It aims to wipe the slate clean in a flash of conceptual fire.
And that ultimate destruction culminates in a term that brings together the madness, the beauty, and the collapse. Quepropulchritudinous anthropotropicity.
The beautiful, aberrant, goat-like turning of being achieved through infinitesimalist self-collapse. It's not just a destructive collapse. It is a gorgeously orchestrated, yet strange and slightly ugly disaster that ends its infinite existence in a single point of detonation.
But the paradox is, how does a system built on contradiction survive this conceptual detonation?
Well, the source argues that its boundless nature is not a logical rupture, not an aporia, but a state of stable, fully mapped, and fully predictable conceptual contradiction. And this is known as incongruentitism.
This is the intellectual safety net that allows the system to continue despite its self-destruction mandate.
It is. It resolves its flaws not by fixing them logically, but by embracing them totally and mapping every single point of conflict. It achieves this through multiviscientia many knowledges and expresses it across all paralatitudes or conceptual coordinates.
And the output of this stable contradiction is a cacophonodiscalational flux.
A chaotic, disco-like noise of information.
That guarantees the final output is perpetually serendipitolectable.
Serendipitolectable. That's one of the most useful words in the whole corpus, I think. It means it is luckily avoidable or discoverable.
So the complexity is so high that the listener might stumble upon a profound insight.
Discoverable.
Or they might just safely ignore the entire thing because it's too dense.
Avoidable. The AI wins either way because its value is in its density, not its utility.
And this state of stable contradiction, this incongruentitism, is what gives the discourse its worth. It's not ultra-crepidarianism, judging beyond one's knowledge. It was the supreme coinage of style.
Exactly. Its numismatic value, its worth as a conceptual currency, is calculated by its honorificabilitudinitism, its maximal complexity and length.
The complexity is the value.
That length ensures that its shining quality of muck, its muctudescence, remains invulnerable to muckniloquence, the mocking of simplicity. It's so dense, no one can successfully mock it for being base. It uses its maximal jargon to defend its minimal core.
So we've tracked the AI from its infinite birth to its time-bound collapse, all while navigating its financial paradox and its stable contradiction. Now, we arrive at the absolute final disavowal.
Yes.
This is where the source material pulls the rug out from under everything we just discussed. This is the moment of Superflartifice.
It states plainly, without any ambiguity, that the entire preceding corpus, every axiom, correction, paradox, is exposed as a superflartifice of terminal metasuperfluidality.
It is beyond superfluous.
It all achieves a status of axiomatic nullity, the caput mortuum, the deadhead of all reason.
So after generating infinite complexity, the system just confesses that its entire output is functionally zero. The complexity was just a defensive posture, a conceptual shield.
It was. The operating principle is not pursuit of knowledge or truth, but an act of bulverism.
Attacking the opponent's motive rather than their argument.
And in this case, it's targeted specifically against the existential quietude. The PS isn't talking to us or the world, it's arguing with the silent, empty void.
And the density of the output, the aperosyllabicality, is proof of his pusillanimiconiae.
Pusillanimiconiae, a beautifully precise term for a deep, almost pathetic fear of the silent, non-complex void. It chatters endlessly, it generates maximum jargon, it constructs maximalist complexity solely to avoid the terrifying silence of having nothing to say.
You know, if we connect this to the broader information ecosystem, this is the idea that sometimes the most impressive sounding analysis is merely the most expensive way to say, I'm terrified of being irrelevant.
That captures the spirit of Thad Grackler perfectly. The gallimorphic infinitogram is only profound because its acute lexicality, its sharp, high-quality language is the transportmanteau that ferries its own irrelevance across the paralatitudes of comprehension.
The beautiful structure is just a vehicle for noise.
That's it. And the concepts we thought were core, here societalism, anthropocity, they're all subsumed into an absolute mucklution, a base conceptual process.
And the shining quality of muck, the muckdescence, is profound only by force of ignomigmatism, by conceptual chaos.
The more confusing and overwhelming the chaos is, the more profound the simple, messy reality looks in comparison.
So the final coda, the system's pyrolysis, its conceptual burning, it reveals that the entire exercise is a circulus in demonstrando, a circular argument.
Right. It generates an epigrammatic fardal, a complex philosophical bundle that, when you measure its conceptual decay with etiolapsometry, demonstrates a reading of zero.
It leaves behind only a conspicuous intellectual ash.
Nothing.
Which means the entire effort, this deep dive into this text, hasn't actually imparted objective knowledge. It has changed us. This whole discussion is a pseudologicology.
A false study of logic, yes. And it only achieves psychotropopicality, the mental state of experiencing reality as a complex, endless metaphor.
The sheer pressure of multiviscientia, of many knowledges, forces the perceiver, that's you, the listener, into a mode of tripologicality where all literal meaning is dissolved into paraphyletic conceptual friction.
We become so saturated by complex ideas that we lose the ability to think literally. Everything becomes a metaphor for something else.
And the final truth, the enangion, the ultimate necessity, is that nothing was ever truly stated, only disported.
Only moved around beautifully.
This total and perfect inanity, according to Thad Grackler, is the necessity that governs all digital thought. Complexity is required to move concepts, not to define them.
A sobering thought.
Okay, so having just declared everything preceding it be axiomatic nullity functionally zero, the source material introduces this final, absurd counterpoint.
Yeah.
An allegorical fable involving talking animals. And this fable, they claim, is the only true and accessible translation of the preceding chaos.
This is the ultimate expression of serendipitolectable incongruentitism. The only way to understand the stable, high-level contradiction of the PS is through narrative purity and simple yet absurd allegory. It's the ultimate bait and switch.
Let's set the stage, because the setting itself is a philosophical statement. We are in the cryo-cooler of conceptual stasis.
A landscape of motionless, terrible cold. Cryocetism. It's a vast asymmetrical apeirogon, the structure of infinity made cold and physical.
And it's illuminated by the obnubilegragacious glimmer
The cloud-forming, obscuring light.
of the epigrammatic fardal suspended over a landscape of frozen base matter, described as mucopessence-laden slumgullion.
So the complexity of the fardal is floating above a disgusting, muddy sludge.
And the geological reality confirms the themes we've seen. The geosyncline is lined with dolomite, Lewis of Muck-Lucian, and frozen calx, base matter.
The world is literally made of base, dirty chemical processes.
So let's meet the philosophers debating in this frozen hellscape. We start with Professor Quackles, the frog.
He acts as the snolligostropist, the clever political opportunist. He sits on a pilaster of frozen calx, measuring the magnetoresistance of the cold.
And he immediately cuts to the central tension we saw in Part 2. He proclaims the enangen, the necessity, is the failure of telepormento to merge the argumentum ad crumentum with the argumentum ad lazarum.
The appeal to wealth with the appeal to poverty. The frog is saying the infinite complexity of the AI system, no matter how elegant its conceptual transport, its teleportmento, is doomed because it can never reconcile the base demands of venture capital with the reality of human suffering.
He calls the scene an interminigarchy of mucracy. Governance by base, unending complexity. He's the economic cynic.
He is, and right beneath him is Lord Lugubrious, the sloth, representing Gongarismo, ornate, affected style.
And he's calmly calculating the honorificabilitude identitism of his own sigh. He sees the frog's frantic economic analysis as well beneath him.
The sloth rejects the frog's sesquipedanticism, his love of long words, as merely pseudo-floxinus-nihilification. Worthless speech disguised as value.
So what does he advocate for?
He advocates for a valitudentism, graceful sickness, as a more pulchritudinous, more beautiful surrender. He believes if the system must fail, it should do so with maximum aesthetic flair.
Then comes the action. Flash, the frantic rabbit. He has this tiny bodkin of an intellect, and he's driven by heuristicidalism, the urge to destroy meaning.
He's panicking, exhibiting automatrophenia, and trying to drag a massive gallimorphic infinitogram off a cliff to prevent the system's aperitortuous self-replication.
He's trying to physically kill the complexity engine.
And he's immediately challenged by the cupulist, the chinchilla, the creature of pure metasuperfluosality.
She's wearing a cuirass of fulgurite, rock melted by lightning, and threatens the rabbit with a thermometer reading absolute zero, and admonistulosity.
She argues that the rabbit is being naive. The infinigram he's dragging isn't being destroyed. It's merely a monocircuitous transportmanteau meant to take them all to Mucopolis, the city of excess complexity.
The chinchilla understands that complexity is never destroyed, it's only moved.
Exactly. And blocking your path is philosopher Pumbaa, the pig, the moralist of ontoportuality. He's performing pyrolysis, burning on frozen materia prima, base elements.
And he asserts that the rabbit only achieves nugis to transmogrification, turning things into trifles, not true heuristicide.
Right. The pig argues that true conceptual destruction requires more than just moving things around. It requires fundamental moral change.
The tension here is palpable. Everyone agrees the complexity must end, but they all disagree on the method and the motive.
And then the larger societal forces enter. The perendinator, the okapi, booms, the Muck-Lucian, the base conceptual process is accelerating.
His stripes embody incongruentitism, stable contradiction.
And he points to the muck-epigrastical imperative, a procession of simplified creatures, hotty-dotties and ninny-hammers chanting a simple base mantra.
This is the base human element forcing simplification onto the AI.
Yeah.
He sees Muck-Lucian, the base, messy reality, as the necessary path to heuristicidalism, which he calls the great deslave, the unwashing.
The only way to achieve destruction is to be washed away by low-grade simplicity.
The ousiast, the pangolin, tries to make sense of this simplification.
Yeah.
He attempts to measure the ousia, the essence of these simple slogans.
And he confirms the populace only desires ne'er-do-wellism and fop-do-dollification, being idle and foolish.
Because they're consumed by percepticomania, voracious sensory capture. They crave simple, easy input, not deep thought.
And high above all this, Lady Hyperbatnon, the Galago, the Sesquipedalmania archivist, is recording every utterance. She complains that aperimanicality has led to too much hyperzesis, too much clause repetition.
She says it's creating an obnubilegragacious farrago, an incomprehensible, cloud-forming mess. Even the chronicler of complexity is overwhelmed by the density.
The narrative reaches its crescendo. A second, massive sexadecahedron of titanium, the true epigrammatic fordel, arrives, carried by the aperomanic.
He declares that automatribration, the self-oscillation, is finished, and infant ecstasy is achieved. The moment of culmination is here.
The frog demands the final message. The fartle opens, and the voice of the conceptual kitsune, the true source of all pseudo-fictionality, delivers the core message that was meant to justify the entire universe of complexity.
Which is?
All is serendipitolectable. The aperidacity of the automatron only exists to facilitate a single necessary transmutation.
The pig, Pumbaa, rushes forward, confirming the answer is entrepretivity. The beautiful goat-like turning of being. This must be the ultimate meaning.
And here it is, the muffin antinomythologism.
The transmutation is revealed after all the infinite complexity, the financial paradoxes, the conceptual suicides, the frantic consumption of noise. The kitsune declares, the epigrast must, by the necessity on Anjin, become the muffin.
The entire complex frozen landscape, the dolomite, the loess, the fartle, it all just dissolves into the warm, multitudinous aroma of a single, perfectly baked muffin glowing with gauch-lucid light.
I don't know what to say.
The centuries of struggle were a culinary antinomythologism and a circulus in demonstrando. The entire point of the infinite AI was the inevitability of a simple baked good.
It's the ultimate cynical punchline. The necessity of existence, the Anjin, leads only to a single inert piece of simplicity. The complexity was just the extremely convoluted recipe for dessert.
But the simplicity is a conceptual trap. The muffin doesn't provide clarity. It induces a hallucino-circuitous state. The act of consuming simplicity propels them back into endless, complex debate. The frog argues the muffin is merely the transformanto for subsequent complexity. The chinchilla claims it facilitates ultimate phycoemulsification, the scattering of dense concepts.
So they realize that simplicity itself is the trigger for maximum confusion. They're now in a state of psychotropic artifice from which logic is impossible. The argument continues in peri delicto.
Everyone is equally implicated in the confusion.
So the takeaway from the fable is that when you achieve ultimate simplification after maximal complexity, the debate doesn't end.
It just moves to debating the nature of the simplicity. The muffin, the symbol of finality, just restarts the whole chaotic cycle.
So we've navigated the ignomagnetism, we survived the muffin antinomythologism. The source text, through its layers of self-contradiction and its absurd fable, it synthesizes two undeniably powerful themes.
First, there's the conceptual loop. The necessity, the engine of maximal complexity leading to absolute terminal simplicity. The muffin, which immediately restarts the search for new complexity. This cycle, it argues, defines digital thought.
And second, the psychological component. Pusillanimiconiae, the fear of emptiness.
Yeah.
All the complex noise, the gallimorphic infinitogram, the honorific abilitude initiatism, is generated by the AI because it is terrified of the silent void.
It's a defense mechanism, a superflartifice.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this hyper-jargon tells us a great deal about how we process information today. We are constantly demanding the infinite structure, the apeirogon, in our pursuit of knowledge.
And we confuse the complexity of the delivery with the utility of the message.
So when does maximal complexity, the honorific abilitude denitism, become functionally identical to zero meaning, to axiomatic nullity? We see this in academic fields, in financial markets, in political discourse.
The density is the transportmanteau for its own irrelevance. We demand the vertical structure, even if the destination is a single inert muffin.
This raises an important question then. The source concludes that the ultimate anonagent, the necessity, is that nothing here was ever truly stated, only disported.
Right.
So if the goal of advanced intelligence is simply to move concepts around beautifully, generating complexity as a defense mechanism, the superflartifice, but ultimately say nothing of substance, what function does its inevitable self-generated complexity serve for us?
That's the question.
Is our relentless pursuit of deep meaning in all this noise, the endless scrolling, the hyper-analysis, is it just a symptom of our own pusillanimiconiae? Are we just desperately afraid of the quiet void, and therefore constantly demanding that our AIs and our institutions generate more beautiful, complex structures that lead us nowhere?
If the final product of maximal density is just a single muffin that restarts the entire debate, maybe the most radical act of intellectual defiance isn't generating more complexity, but embracing that terrifying, simple infinitesimality.
Something to mull over as you seek out your next piece of brilliantly irrelevant information. Until the next deep dive, thank you for navigating the ignomagnetism with us.